I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Okay, hey everybody. Welcome back. I just want to give a quick shout out to all the guests that I've had on, and including today's guest. A little behind the scenes, they have pretty much a day to read all these articles and get it together. I send them to them about Wednesday morning-ish because I try to get the newest news, and then on top of everything that they're doing, they study up. So including today's guest, which is Jen Barnes, founder and owner of Rough Tumble Sports Bar in Ballard. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Did you feel like you're cramming for exams?
Yes. Truth be told, I had to ask Rachel for a little extra time.
It's okay. I needed the time too. So we're not in college anymore. We're busy. But Jen, if you don't know her already, where have you been? But she opened the Rough Tumble Sports Bar almost a year and a half ago. It's the first ever pub for women's sports because it prioritizes women's sports on TVs and sound. However, it does still play some of the men's sports. Prior to this, she was the president of the board for Q Law Foundation. She worked as the VP of Operations and Communications for OneEnergy, was the CEO of 2 other companies, and has a long history of working in management and operations for law firms. My goodness. Busy.
Yeah. Yes.
So after reading that, before we get into the news, why are you so passionate about women's sports, and kind of wrapped up in that, why open a bar after working in corporate and law firms for so long?
Well, a bar is categorically more fun than a law firm, I think.
That is a great answer, yeah.
Yeah. Passionate about women's sports. I think watching women's sports is the most fun, but I love watching sports in general. So I love going to an emcee game or Kraken, Hawks, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I really love Seattle Storm and the Reign. And the light bulb moment and why I did this was really less about how much fun I have watching them, mm-hmm. and the fact that if you are a women's sports fan, you really don't get to watch women's sports in a public place, mm-hmm. with your friends. And I felt like in 2021, this was incredibly inequitable. And it was time to do something to change that. So I know you enjoy watching sports.
And I experienced that with the Reign. I tried to watch it on TV because I started getting really into our women's soccer team here. And you had to have one specific Paramount Plus app. And a lot of people don't have the resources to pay for that. So you played at your bar. Yeah.
Women's sports are still stuck behind a lot of paywalls. That is changing. But, I think the average person isn't going to have every single app that there is out there. And it's nice to just be able to turn the TV on and have women's sports.
Did your friends and family think you were crazy to say, hey, I'm jumping from corporate to restaurants?
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you did.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to hear a little bit more about your experience being a small business owner and your restaurant kind of throughout the episode today with the stories that we have. So let me give you an overview of the 5 that we've got. Bumbershoot is opening an arts venue in the old Bed Bath & Beyond space. The Fremont Brewery has a new owner. Certain to-go containers are going to be banned. ZoomCare will accept Medicare, and an affordable housing project planned for U District. You ready to get into it?
I am.
Okay. This first one, there's kind of like a lot of background on this story. So I'll start with the story. We'll talk about it a little bit, but I think that's an interesting history of Bumbershoot. So the headline is that technically the producers of Bumbershoot. So the producers of Bumbershoot is this organization called New Rising Sun. And that organization, along with their nonprofit arm called Third Stone, they are unveiling a new music and arts venue. And the arts venue is going to be called Cannonball Arts. And that is what's going to be taking over the old Bed Bath & Beyond space in downtown. They are partnering with the Muckleshoot Indian tribe. They own a stake in New Rising Sun, but they won't really have any part in programming. So it's planning to open in 2025. The lease is a 5-year lease, and it's leased from Kleiss Properties. The cost was, we don't have an exact cost of what they paid for it, but it's a 7-figure number. Now, what is this space? Jen, from the article, what did you picture happening in this space? Because it kind of talked a little bit about like the arts and music venue. What did you pull, like kind of what was going to be going on in there?
Yeah, I don't know. Curious, right? It's a huge space. If listeners haven't been there, the old Bed Bath & Beyond space downtown is enormous. It kind of strikes this weird spot between all the really beautiful Amazon buildings and some of the gorgeous hotels down there. And then this just kind of block or two that is not really taken off for quite a few years. And it's, it's big, it's cavernous. I think it has the potential for all different kinds of cool experiences in there. I didn't go to Bumbershoot last year, and that was something that they referenced in the news piece. Like, if you went last year, you can understand what these experiences are going to be like. So it left me questioning, and, I think categorically there's not enough art in the world. So...
yeah, it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
That's a great thing.
I think my one thought is, it says it's a for-profit endeavor. So they're going to make money off of sponsorship, ticket sales, and membership with the support of Third Stone, which again is that nonprofit. And you and I were kind of talking. You have a pretty big space in Ballard, and I have run events before, and let me tell you, ticket sales do not do much.
No, it's not where it's at.
So my first thought is, this is amazing. I love this, and I really hope they can make it financially feasible.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's the first place that my head went to as well. I'm glad that they have the nonprofit arm, because there are a lot of arts grants out there. I think one of the challenges that I see is over time is just, people bulk at going into arts experiences if there's a cost. And unfortunately, I think that's just a little bit of a societal thing. So people don't go to an art museum as often as maybe they go to a coffee shop. So I'm curious what that is. And I also wonder, how do we make art accessible to everyone? So,
yeah, again, I hope that they get the sponsorship for it. Yeah. I want to stay on this just a little bit longer, because I find the history of Bumbershoot to be interesting, and I don't know if everybody knows it. You said you've been once before or not at all to Bumbershoot?
Once or twice, but it's been a long time.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't been, and I wish I had, but here's the background. So it started a long time ago, but I'm only going to go back to 1980, which is when it was produced by a nonprofit called One Reel from 1980 to 2019. That's probably when you went, right?
That's when I went.
So in 2015, so for the last 4 years of when One Reel was running it, they brought in AEG. AEG, if you're not familiar, they're the ones that run Showbox. They run kind of some big name things.
Okay.
AEG has it they try to turn it around, and it used to be, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be kind of like local artists, more affordable kind of vibe.
Yeah, it definitely did not used to be the big names that it is or has become over time. Yeah.
So I think AEG came in and they brought like Lizzo, they brought these like big name acts, started charging more, and they were trying to turn it around, because I guess they weren't really making money on this. Then in 2019, AEG doesn't renew their contract. And they said that they had lost money on it, and they can't do it. And then, kind of conveniently, that's around when COVID happens. So it's on a hiatus for 3 years. Seattle Center owns the Bumbershoot name. So they put out an RFP, a request for proposal, saying, hey, who wants to plan this event? We want to put Bumbershoot back on. Who wants to do it? There's these 3 guys, Joe Paganelli, he's the GM of McCall Hall, Steven Severin, concert booker for Numos, and Greg Lundgren, who's more known in the arts world. They come together and they create this company called New Rising Sun to submit a proposal. So it wasn't an existing group from my reading. And they end up winning the bid in December of 2021. And then they put on their first show in 2023. So from an events perspective, that's, I think, a very fast turnaround, especially, right?
Turnaround, yes.
How long did it take you to open the restaurant from conception to opening?
Well, the industry average is usually about 18 months. And I did mine it was a little bit less than a year from conception to going live. And there were a number of spots along the way where it went way faster than it should have, and I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
But, running events when you're booking people and having to deal with permits and stuff at the size that Bumbershoot is, that's fast. And I don't know if I remember reading this or not, but didn't they think they weren't going to get that? Yeah.
That's 2 years. That's what I've heard. I guess I should say. Hearsay, yes. I don't think they thought.
They do have a lot of booking experience.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So from a conference planning perspective, for me, planning like a typical corporate conference for like 800, you need at least a year, and you've already secured the venue probably 5 years in advance. Yeah. So for a festival, I mean, you need, I would think, at least 2 years. So kudos to them for having it. I wasn't there in 2023, but it seemed like it went well. And so I'll be curious.
I didn't hear anything negative about it at all. And I had definitely heard some not great things about the prior years of Bumbershoot. So
we'll have to check out. Again, I think that opens in 2025 for that arts venue. I think it's part of their whole mission of just elevating arts in Seattle, and I'm all for that. Mm-hmm. Okay, our second story is Fremont Brewery sells to Seattle Hospitality Group, SHG. So they're taking a controlling stake in it. Fremont Brewing is the third largest brewer in the state. Do you want to guess what the first and second one are? I'm putting you on the spot. I know.
Oh, it's got to be Georgetown.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's number one. Do you know number two? It's in Soto. Or not Soto. Yeah, by the stadium. Space Dust.
Really?
Well, Elysian. I was giving you a hint, but yeah, Elysian. Yeah. So Georgetown's number one, Elysian's number two, and then Fremont Brewing's number three. It's okay.
Well, in my head, I wasn't thinking Elysian could be it because they're actually owned by an out-of-state. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair.
All I could think of was Ghostfish. And I'm like, that can't be that. Yeah.
Yes, that's from PSBJ's reporting. So Fremont Brewery was co-founded by Sarah Nelson and her husband, Matt Lincecum, in 2009. And Sarah continues to own a portion. Why this is interesting is because Sarah Nelson is our city council president. Mm-hmm. So she became president in January. And part of this article was kind of talking about, are there ethical concerns about that? So I guess I'll start with that. Do you think that there's a conflict of interest?
I mean, I'm not an ethics professor by any stretch. I would leave that up to whoever's in charge.
The Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission said that they will review.
Yes.
But what's your opinion?
I mean, ultimately, probably not. Yeah. I think it's important to look into these things. I know that Sarah hasn't been that involved in Fremont for a long time. She's got an ownership stake, but she's not really considered like running the organization on a day-to-day basis. I think she and her husband threw her heart and soul into building that, and then it's ballooned. And from my perspective, I think there's a lot of value on having people in positions of leadership for other businesses when they're representing companies like Rough Tumble in decision-making process who've had businesses. And I think, there's going to be overlap no matter what. That's why we have the ethics committee, right?
Yeah, I'm like, don't we want people with a little bit of bias? Like, don't we want people that are not just career council people? Like, we want them to be like, oh, when I owned a business, this is what I learned. And like, for her to still be relevant for what's going on in the business community.
Absolutely. I would like somebody, especially a woman, a businesswoman, helping guide decision-making. I think the trigger point, right, is making sure that she's not allowed to make decisions that benefit Fremont Brewing.
Right.
And or maybe, she can't meet with the lobbyists from the Brewery Association or whatever that is, right? Like, so as long as those things are kind of kept aligned.
Yeah, I don't see an issue. So Seattle Hospitality Group, SHG, they have holdings and partners, including Pike Brewing, which the article said that they're going to be combining Pike Brewing and Fremont Brewing, but they're going to maintain brand identity separately. They own some Ethan Stoll restaurants, Sheraton Grand Hotel, Kenmore Air. I mean, there's a huge part of that. So for Rough Tumble, how do you feel about hospitality groups? Would you want to be a part of one? What are kind of some pros and cons? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, I have. I mean, there's pros, right? You've got a group of investors, you've got people managing a lot of different investments. It allows you to leverage one entity onto the other, grow something, start it can fail, and it doesn't take the entire thing down. I mean, there's a gift there. You can do all kinds of referral programs, blah, blah, blah. The least of which is you can make sure that Fremont Brewing and Pike Brewing are at all the Ethan Stoll restaurants, right?
Yeah. And served at Sheraton and served at the events. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a lot of benefit there. I purposefully didn't go down a huge investor route because
so how many owners do you have for your restaurant?
Just me.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I also own the debt. But it's...
why was that important to you?
It was really important to me because Rough Tumble was doing something that really nobody in the world had ever done. And I think any time that you do that, especially as a woman business owner, you're going to get questioned a whole lot more than something that has proven data points behind it that, you can look at and say, well, this restaurant did really well in this, fast service area. And so therefore we will invest in you. And here are the numbers you have to hit. I was doing something that was so different that I knew I had to drive it forward in the way that I saw it being most successful. And I was pretty confident that having a bunch of investors who might question that along the way, at least until I proved the concept, was pretty important to me to just be a solo decision maker.
And are you looking for investors now? Is that something on your radar?
Not in this one. I mean, the plan has always been to grow and expand. And that will definitely take a raise in an investor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it, but like you were saying, you were doing something so new. From my understanding, Sports Bra in Portland was the first bar that's showing exclusively women's sports.
Yep.
And you are the first one. And I think you opened after they did. You're the second sort of women's sports bar, but yours is different in that it does play the other sports bars, right?
Yep.
Sports games.
Yep. And I think the key point from the business, investor perspective was that the Sports Bra, Jenny and I didn't know each other existed.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Both of us were developing our business plans, seeking, loans or investor funding or whatever it was. We were building all of this out almost aligned.
Wow.
We didn't know each other.
Huh.
And originally I was going to try to open in July, which was much closer to her April opening. But I didn't like the space that I had chosen and moved on to something else, which kind of put it a little bit further behind.
Yeah.
So she opened hers first. She only plays women's sports. The Sports Bar only plays women's sports. And mine is different. But I think the perspective at the time when I was building out my business plan was the only one in the world that was doing anything like it, that was playing women's sports at all. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I imagine those conversations, you didn't want to have to be arguing with your other investors about every little thing.
No, and I had to argue with and prove a lot of points along the way just to get the doors open. So,
well, cool. Okay, our third story, to-go containers to be banned in June. I know that sounds dramatic, but I looked into it, and it's actually it's one specific type of to-go container. So think about when you're at the gas station and you're getting a cup of coffee. It's that super styrofoamy kind. There's some plates and to-go containers, things like that. They're going to be outlawed in June of 1st. Also, those single-use foam coolers. I don't know if you've done that. I've grabbed one, go to the beach. I know.
Yeah.
We're
I felt really guilty as I was doing it too.
Oh, anyway, so, brings up the question, what's been your experience with kind of supply chain and to-go containers? This is not going to really you, right? Because you don't use that. Yeah.
No, it isn't. And, I've actually had a couple of people ask me about it. I really care about the environment. And I think Seattle does a pretty good job of dealing with its recycling and compost stuff. So everything that we have in any kind of to-go format has been compostable since day one. But I thought this article on this concept and question was kind of interesting. So I did go out and do a little price checking. You can still get these to-go items at Costco or Sysco or whatever, at least for a little bit longer. Interestingly, they're about the same price.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. I was thinking that this is going to be like good for the environment, like maybe bad for small business owners.
Yeah, but... it was like a cent or two difference.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Per unit, yeah.
Well, kind of speaking of this, it speaks to the influence of laws on small businesses. So have there been other laws that you've come across that have maybe good intentions, but have maybe caused issues for you?
I think there's a couple that are tough for small business restaurant owners because a restaurant is just so expensive as it is. And I think the end user who's sitting there having their cold beer and their, broccolini, don't necessarily understand every layer of cost that goes into that. One that kind of came to mind for me when you asked that question was the sugar tax, the sugar beverage tax.
Right.
It's been around for a little while as a restaurant owner. It's shockingly expensive. So most of what I spend on the tonic water, the, Coke products, etc., is actually the sugar tax.
Well, when you were saying like people aren't paying for refills, and if I got a vodka soda, like I'm not going to be charged the vodka soda plus the tonic.
And like a Shirley Temple. We have a lot of kids who come in. Shirley Temples are super popular. I lose money on a lot of these things, but I can't charge $7 for a Coke either.
Yeah, I know.
So then it just gets rolled into something else.
But it is a good example of like good intentions, because that tax is going to go to help with child health, I think, and obesity and things like that. I think it had good intentions, but it does have.
Well, I think that comes back to really Seattle and Washington State are just we don't have state income taxes. Right. So we have to tax absolutely everything to sustain anything. And, unfortunately, it's very hard on small business.
But it's easier to do your taxes because you get to skip that whole section.
It feels really good when you do that.
I lived in Oregon and California, and I had to do them before, but this one you don't. But yes, I hear you. Okay, our fourth story, ZoomCare is now going to be accepting Medicare. So ZoomCare, it's not, if you're not from around here, ZoomCare has nothing to do with Zoom, the video calling platform. It is sort of like
Zoom
an urgent
in and
care.
out.
Yeah, you just zoom in and zoom out. It's an urgent care. And then if you are confused about the difference between Medicaid and Medicare, Medicare is for the 65 and older, so the older generation, and Medicaid is for the low income. So what we're talking about right now is Medicare for an older generation.
Yeah.
Why I like the story is that I go to ZoomCare a lot. So ZoomCare was founded in 2006 in Portland. It was bought by Peace Health, a Washington Catholic health system, in 2018. And they added a bunch of new clinics. So they have about 50 between Oregon and Washington. From what I could tell, it's only Oregon and Washington right now. The article cites that the reason why they're able to accept Medicare now is that they're using a new platform called Athena One that will allow them to communicate with other healthcare providers and scheduling. And I don't know, it just sounds like a better platform to be able to take things. So I love this because I love that they're using a better software. When I go to other healthcare places, they ask me when I got my IUD, and I have to go on my phone, go to Instagram, and look at a post that I posted when I got a new job, because I remember that was the insurance I had when I got the new job. And I just feel like that shouldn't be the system. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you put it in. Like, can't you look this up? Or like, can't you ask Kaiser? Like, you know what I mean? Why am I looking at my Instagram? But
yes, I agree with you.
But it kind of speaks to like the role of software in a company. Have you experienced something like this? Like what are your thoughts on this in general?
I mean, I don't know what I would do without software at Rough Tumble. So much of, from Canva to Toast processing
Toast
to scheduling. There are definitely some software programs that are far better than others. I'm very glad I chose Toast. It happens to be one of the more expensive ones, but it does a lot more things and they're well integrated.
Yeah.
So in the long run, it saves you money. I think one of the bigger things is I just think it's smart, because anytime you exclude a demographic, you're losing money, you're losing representation, and so, I did a little reading on this, and, Medicare is growing by something like upwards of 8+% per year in enrollees. So if they're not doing Medicare, they're categorically losing money. Plus there's only a couple insurance companies that actually process Medicare.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge market share that they're missing out on. I think it's smart. Another thing that I thought was pretty interesting was the fact that King County, which is primarily where ZoomCare is in Washington State, has a higher percentage of women enrollees than most of the state averages, or at least of the county averages, and higher than the state average. And so I think, one thing that I think is great about this is that it's making easy, quick, needed healthcare more available to women.
Yeah, absolutely. They are kind of different than other hospital systems in that it's very tech heavy. You can make an appointment on your app for that same day. You can do it online too. And the waiting room kind of feels like you're at like an Apple store. It doesn't feel like a typical place. No. So for that reason, it was kind of targeting some younger demographic. But to your point, I think they're trying to expand, help more people, and also probably make more money. Yep. I think it's a good thing. Hopefully it goes well.
Yeah.
Okay, our last story. Affordable housing. And we were just talking about how you're wearing a shirt that says everyone watches women's sports, and obviously you and I like sports. And again, I also had, do you know Will Nichols, who I had on before? He's a big sports guy too, and he worked as a ref for a really long time. And he also didn't get any sports stories. And I'm like, guys, I'm sorry. I don't make the news. I just talk about it. Okay, affordable housing is a project set for U districts. So Low Income Housing Institute, LIHI. I don't know if it's called LIHI, but that's what I want to call it today. But they selected a building in U District for their transit-oriented affordable housing project. It was a Sound Transit construction staging area. Sound Transit and the City Office of Housing issued an RFP, and LIHI won. So they're planning a 12-story, 160-unit building with ground-level retail and an urban rest stop, which will be a bathroom for the public. And that's going to be just a few blocks away from the light rail. What I thought was interesting about this, I guess I already told you the answer, but do you remember what I said about what it takes to qualify as low-income housing?
Oh, yes. It's I think in Seattle, it's like something like 78,000 or something like that. Yes. Which sounds like so much.
But
for anybody who's listening to this podcast outside of Seattle, it costs a lot to live in Seattle. And people always come, people around the country, they'll be like, oh, New York's really high, San Francisco's really high. Well, Seattle's right up there.
Oh, yeah.
So 78,000 is not that much. And I did read up on this a little bit, and it's going to do a blend between 30% of that, 60% of that, and 80%. So it will make sure that there's room for people who are more down at like $36,000 or $38,000 level. I just don't know what percentage.
Yeah. I think it's just like when people read these articles or think about low income housing, there's an assumption of like, okay, it's just these super, super, super poor people that are going to come into my neighborhood, whatever. But when you think about it, like somebody making 78,000, like a lot of, my assistants and things like that, they weren't at that. So it's like, it's a good chunk of Seattle right now.
Yeah. And there's a huge element of this that is family friendly.
Yeah.
So you've got, large families are able to, create safer places for kids to grow.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I do actually know the spot where it is pretty well because I drive by it pretty regularly. And right now it's an area for tiny homes. Oh. And there's only 36 there. And it's wonderful. It's created a great space. And it is actually part of the Low Income Housing Institute's already, the one running those. So I love the fact that there's maybe home for 160 people or at least 160 units.
Yeah.
I will say I did not know what an urban rest stop was.
Yes, I had to look that up. I think it's just a fancy name for a bathroom and hygiene.
Yeah, it's also going to, at least as currently designed, it's going to incorporate shower facilities for people who don't have them readily available. And I think, there's been a lot said in Seattle about the fact that we don't have enough public restrooms. And I think being able to go to the bathroom in a safe and hygienic way or shower is a right that we can support. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good thing.
I love that it's right there on light rail because, if it is likely that maybe you don't have a vehicle if you're in a low income situation. So it makes transit to and from work and home and daycare and school a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I like seeing a lot more low income housing showing up. You and I are not low income housing experts. So I wanted to kind of shift the questioning a little bit more into choosing the space of Rough Tumble. So kind of, pros and cons of like ground level retail. Like I said, this project that they're working on is going to have that. Were you considering ground level retail? Were you considering being by transit? Kind of what was your process of choosing that space in Ballard?
Yeah, well, and this is interesting because there is another low income housing building that's really close to a neighborhood that I wanted to end up in and was opening right around the time. So it was more up in the Roosevelt area. Okay. It was opening right around the time that I was looking for space. And the retail restaurant areas in that building were just obscenely expensive. It was like $48 a square foot without any build out.
What is that? I guess what's average? What's normal?
Oh God, it's all over the place.
Okay.
At the time it was very high because there was no build out. So you still had to build everything out and build out the if you have fries, if you want to serve fries in your restaurant, you have to have a special kind of hood. Those hoods cost $200,000 or $300,000 to put in.
Whoa.
So, it's just a lot of upfront expense. So those two things didn't, but the building itself is just further up the light rail from where this one is. And that is a spot where I did consider. So I am street level, but for anybody who's listening to this podcast, I have the upper floor of it. So you walk in and you go up a couple steps. And it's on this little bit of a slopey hill. So, I absolutely did it. For me, it wasn't so much about street level versus non-street level as much as finding the space that was going to fit the number of people that I wanted to give women's sports to, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I think it was less about that. I also really like an older building versus a new construction. I think it has more soul. And I wanted something that really tied the community, the Seattle sports community, to something more historic. So when you walked in, you were like, oh yes, this feels like home. Yeah. And that you walk into because it's an old sawmill building. So it's, you've been there. It's
Remind me, it was what, Kickin' Boots or something before?
Kickin' Boot and then Sawyer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Kickin' Boot was like a barbecue and whiskey joint, and then got completely changed to this very light, kind of almost Scandinavian design, more of a James Beard kind of smaller plates restaurant. And Rough Tumble kind of took over that and changed it again, and is sort of somewhere between the two.
Yeah, but if you had would you have wanted to be closer to transit if you could have found a spot?
I would have loved that.
Yeah.
I do love, the Ballard neighborhood is wonderful. it's a hub. It's a draw for foodies and music goers and arts. But it is, as anybody who's tried to get to Ballard ever knows, it's, you got to hike there a little bit more. So I really, I had narrowed it down to be sort of between I-5 and 99, which are the two primary traffic corridors that go north and south. But we were, the industry was coming out of COVID at that point. A lot of available spaces were caught up in restructuring with the eviction moratoriums. And there was just nothing available that hit any of the marks that I wanted. So
yeah, well, we just need Sound Transit to get some east-west options going with the light rail.
Hovercraft.
And get us a hovercraft, yeah, for real. Okay, well, we're going to close out, but before we do, is there anything that you want our audience to know? Is there any events coming up, any fun things happening that you want to share, whether that's with your restaurant or with women's sports?
Watch women's sports.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't now, there's been such a increase in media coverage. I know there's a lot of hype going on right now with, Women's March Madness just wrapping and that kind of thing. But we have two really, really incredible women's teams. I mean, Seattle really is one of the hubs for women's sports, in the world, let alone in the nation. We go to a rain game. It's incredible. Go to a storm game. It's incredible. You're going to be able to see all the women who just got drafted that everybody's talking about right now. Single tickets for Caitlin Clark's new team, Indiana Fever, are barely available.
Wow.
So, and then, we've got the Olympics coming up this summer. We've got a lot of really exciting stuff. I would say kind of the next one on my radar is WNBA season starts in a couple weeks.
Okay.
And then we're really looking forward to the Softball World Series coming up in May too. So.
And you're going to be hosting events there?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to do... One of the first times I think it will be the first time that this has ever happened publicly, is actually Selection Sunday for women's softball, which is actually Mother's Day. So mark your calendars.
There you go. Bring it on. Okay. Well, thank you everybody who is listening on their commute or on their walk or whatever you are doing. We really appreciate it. If you want to like and subscribe, that helps me out. And just thank you for everyone for all their support. I've been hearing a lot of fun things from all my friends and family and random people have come up to me. So it's been really fun. So thank you to all of you. And also thank you, Jen, for joining me for this episode.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
This has been The Weekly. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We love listener feedback. So if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at theweeklyseattle@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.